Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I am Hub Arkush, along with my co-host every week, our Shaw Media Group sports editor, Kyle Nabors, and our Shaw Local Bears Insider beat reporter, Sean Hammond. And guys, good to be back with you. We took a little week off last week since the team was off. Team also took an extra day off this week that garnered a lot of attention. So we'll touch base quickly on that. I think the bigger story is that Matt Eberflus continues to shift some of his troops around, guys going up and down, first, second string. It was the offensive line that drew a lot of attention this week, although Flus told us that they'd also made moves at wide receiver and defensive line that weren't as obvious to some folks. So on top of that, any questions, thoughts, comments that you guys might have, if you are with us live, and you can do that by joining us pretty much every Friday morning at 9:30. I know we've been off schedule a little bit the last couple of weeks. The summer gets a little crazy, but you can always know if you watch our Twitter accounts. That would be at Sean_Hammond, at Kyle Nabors, or at Hub_Arkush, and we'll make sure you know whether we're going or not if there's a schedule change. But for the most part, it's Friday morning, 9:30 Chicago times. You can join us through our Twitter accounts or by going to YouTube, and that way you get to participate in the podcast, and it makes it a lot more fun, and I think hopefully a lot more interesting for everybody. However, if you prefer not to be on a schedule with us and just want the podcast, that's great. We love that too. Go to the App Store on your phone or iTunes or ShawLocal.com to download a subscription. You can get it delivered to you as it's ready and then listen to it at your leisure. So either way, we really are glad you are with us. We do appreciate it. And, guys, it's an interesting time of the year. Next week will be crazy because we'll get 3 days of access with veteran minicamp. But then the team takes off. They go home. They take summer vacation from June 17th until reporting day, which I believe is going to be July 27th. We don't know that yet for sure, but if they follow the schedule they have in past years, they'll be there on a Wednesday and start working on a Thursday. But that's about 5-6 weeks of silence out of Halas Hall. So a lot more stories percolating up in the next week or so. This week, however, as I mentioned, I guess the main focus, guys, was on the changes on the offensive line. And specifically, we got to practice on Wednesday after it was moved from Tuesday because of the lost OTA. Actually, let's start there real quickly and then get everything in order. Guys, we've determined now what happened. I have a column on it at ShawLocal.com. I know that Sean did a great job with the news reporting on it too. But the bottom line is the Bears were docked one of their 9 OTAs. They were penalized, lost a practice session, which is significant in some respects to a new coaching staff installing new systems. You want to get as much work time as you can. But the reasoning gets a little vague, and it's really this no contact during the off season, no contact during unpadded practices. And, Sean, at the end of the day, I guess the best way to report it is there really wasn't any contact, but occasionally when guys are running around, they bump into each other, they fall down, they trip over each other. And when apparently NFLPA observers see people on the ground, they consider that too excessive, too much contact, at least according to pretty much everybody we talked with the Bears, from Flus on down through the players. They seemed to indicate that was the only thing they could figure out that would have said to the NFLPA they needed to be punished.
Yeah, and that's what this was. I've had some people asking me, and I'm sure you guys have too. Did somebody on the Bears rat them out or whatever? But Cole Kmet explained that really well to us. That the NFLPA sends reps around to all these teams, and they're watching practices occasionally, from time to time, and it's I guess one of those reps saw something that they didn't like, and they reported it, and that's sort of how this all came about. Talking to the players, nobody was like, oh yeah, we had, we crossed the line. Nobody thought that. Cole Kmet himself, who is the team's representative with the union, said he was a little surprised that they were docked to practice. He didn't see anything that he thought would be worthy of that, but it's not always up to them too. And so yes, they're docked to practice. That's from a coach's perspective, that's a bummer, but grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference.
Yeah, Kyle, Sean is absolutely correct in everything he says, but we never really got a final word. When Matt Eberflus was asked if he knew how or why it was reported, he said, "I am not." He said it twice. He said, "I am not." And then we talked to Cole, and he mentioned that there were observers there early in the OTAs, but nobody knows specifically exactly why or they were punished. They didn't get a report on it or how it was reported. That was Cole Kmet's best assumption. I did talk to one source with the team, said, totally off the record, that it's quite possible that a player or a couple players, were unhappy and went to the Players Association. They really don't know. I think if the team or teammates did find that out, they wouldn't tell us anyway. Ratting anybody out in public. So at the end of the day, we don't know. But what it comes down to for me, and this is part of what I wrote about, is the whole thing is so stupid in the first place. The bottom line is that the NFL Players Association is a badly failed organization that has given its players two bad 10-year collective bargaining agreements. They're only in year 2 of the latest ones, and they have not gotten any of the things that the players would like or need, such as guaranteed contracts, less restrictions on free agency, medical care after their careers are over, things that really matter. And in fact, have given back money. When DeMaurice Smith, the current executive director of the NFLPA, took over, I believe it was in 2009, players were receiving about 53% of football revenue. They're now receiving about 48%. And so, and I'm not blaming it on DeMaurice Smith. The NFL union is tough. You've got guys with average careers of 3.5 years. They're not going to be raising flags and causing trouble and going out on strike and missing half a season. They're in a tough spot. But at the end of the day, that's the bottom line. The owners pretty much own these players. And so in this case, the executive committee of the union, looking for things they could negotiate, said, well, it's a dangerous game. We need to work less in the offseason. We need to get paid more in season. They came up with these rules. I'm not saying that some of them aren't wise for safety purposes. By all means, players' health and well-being should be protected. But this is just silliness. We only see 1 of 3 practices each week, but we know full well without pads on, these guys weren't, going after each other and having football contact out there. And I think it's just kind of an unfortunate symptom or symbol that people sometimes miss with this union of what a failed organization it is. And this is the kind of stuff that they come up with.
Yeah, the NFLPA has been badly beaten in the last 2 CBAs, as you said, and this is kind of a way for them to claw back a little bit of, I don't even know what's a good way to put it, of showing that it's legitimate, I guess. But, you look at the last season, I believe, or last offseason, there was 3 teams, I believe, that were docked in OTA. And I think in 2, maybe all 3 of those instances, fines were also handed out to the coach.
I believe it was all 3.
All 3,
yeah. So with and Matt Eberflus or the Bears were not fined for this. I don't know if maybe they changed that rule or if this was a lesser infraction than what you saw last year. Yeah, you do need to put guardrails in to make sure teams aren't abusing, these OTAs. But it's one of those things where it's kind of like, can we just use common sense here? Unless there was a clear violation, that it seems to be a bit ticky-tack.
Yeah, which, by the way, there could have been a clear violation. Again, we really don't know. But at that point, I would assume, everything always comes out eventually. And if there was a clear violation, you would think that you wouldn't have a bunch of players and coaches scratching their heads and saying, gee, we don't know what happened, but we're just going to move on.
And at the end of the day, we're talking about a young team with a new coaching staff. These guys want to get after it. They want to earn position. They want to earn trust. We'll get into Tevin Jenkins, but we've heard Tevin Jenkins talk about needing to earn the trust of a new coaching staff to try and earn a starting position. All those young guys feel that way. A lot of the veterans feel that way. So it's not surprising to see guys end up on the ground. It happens throughout training camp. It's going to when you have 300-pound guys running into each other, even if you don't have pads on, occasionally they're going to fall down.
It's bound to happen.
Well,
yeah.
And Sean, I think the most repetitive comment we heard from players is, hey, we got 90 guys out here, competing for 53 jobs. And, we're here to show the coaches that we belong in this league. We're going to go 100%. And I think what happened here is that you had players going 100% in what are allowable non-contact drills. but the way the game is played, you're going to bump into each other once in a while. And I just struggle with the fact that these are the things that the union worries about, and I think it's because there's basically no teeth in the union. The owners have pretty much complete control over the things that matter. And so that's how you end up with a situation like this. So,
Timothy,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Kyle.
No, I was just going to. Timothy Wire said, I think Seattle lost a draft pick for this infraction in the past. Do you guys recall that?
You can be fined draft picks, and that I think it has happened. I didn't remember if it was Seattle. I think Tim's probably right. But again, that is with a legitimate violation of the non-contact rule. I mean, they didn't take away a draft pick because two guys accidentally tripped over each other and fell on the ground. Obviously, if it was Seattle, Pete Carroll was running some drills that were deemed excessive contact, in his explanation, Cole said that he did hear, somebody heard from the NFLPA that there were a couple things that they didn't like. And then it was interesting because Matt Eberflus was asked, well, did you correct those things? And he said, I don't know how to answer that. And I think it's because he didn't know what was wrong in the first place, So, but yes, I mean, hey, I'm not saying that players should be having, full out football contact without equipment during the summer. No, of course they shouldn't, and yes, you should be monitoring that. But who really believes that these coaches are going to do that these players are going to stand still for that? So, yeah, it is possible. You can, violate the rule that badly. And in that regard, be penalized the draft choice. But that's obviously not what happened here with the Bears. So I don't want any.
I think the Seattle thing was multiple instances too, where I think they were caught several times for doing that or running drills that they shouldn't have been. So,
yeah, I would think to the extent that it cost you a draft pick, it wasn't one single violation or one small accident that somebody had. So at any rate, they went back to work on Wednesday. The one thing that was puzzling to me is that then, though, they got together on Thursday for what they said was their 9th and final team activity. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because in the initial scheduling that we got, media access was on the second day, the middle day of OTAs. The original dates I saw on these were Monday through Wednesday. And so if Tuesday was taken away, how they got to come back Thursday for what turned out to be a team outing as opposed to practice, that's a little bit of a confusing mystery to me. But unless I've got my dates wrong and we were there on the first day each week as opposed to the second day, it's not really relevant or significant at this point. And by the way, Thursday did turn into the team all going on buses to Wrigley Field and having kind of like the field day that we all used to have in grammar school where you get to go, compete at certain events and win blue ribbons. And I got to believe that that's not against the rules anyway. So not really a significant point. Although apparently, Sean, we're told that Cole Kmet showed everybody a little bit of his baseball background in the home run derby.
Cole Kmet and Justin Fields are ripping home runs at Wrigley Field. I think the offense is going to be just fine this year.
Yeah. Which kind of leads me to something you said as we were coming on. I think you said it, Kyle, or maybe we were just talking before we came on about the overflowing praise for Justin Fields coming out of these OTAs and everything. And again, I don't want to throw cold water on anybody here. I think that's great. He's making a good impression on the young team. Everybody's happy with him. But to the point now where people are talking about how great he looks, we haven't seen anything yet. They're running around, as John Fox used to say, in underwear on grass, and they're playing catch. I mean, they're doing walkthroughs, they're doing timing drills, and so hopefully he will be great this year. But please stop all the Justin Fields looks great and his leadership is outstanding and unbelievable how hard he's working. He's doing what every starting quarterback in the NFL is doing in 32 camps right now, and that's good, by the way. Again, I don't want to turn this into a negative. But people need to slow their roll a little bit, at least until we get to training camp and they put pads on and we can start to get some idea of how this looks in terms of exactly what kind of steps Justin Fields has taken and is going to be able to take this year, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. You can't really read into OTAs all that much, and you can't read into what they're doing on the field until they get in pads and they can move around a little bit and actually look like they're playing real football. We saw that 2-minute drill on Wednesday. Justin Fields kept a play alive with his feet and hit somebody down the middle. I think it was Equinemius St. Brown right down the middle. And, the D linemen are pulling up because you're not going to, they can't hit him. They're not going to, of course he's going to keep the play alive. Like, he can't be hit. But I do think there's it's worth discussing at least, some of the progress he's making and some of the things that they're saying about just working on his footwork and shortening that throwing motion and just the way he's attacking this new offense. And I think it does matter that, he's, as opposed to last year when he was stuck behind Andy Dalton, he's very clearly the guy. And he seems to be embracing that, at least, in the ways that he can this time of year.
We've heard the Bears talk a little bit about the changes at the quarterback room, obviously with Andy Dalton and Nick Foles no longer here, and Trevor Siemian in, and who's the third guy? I'm blanking on the third name here.
Nathan Peterman.
The great Nathan Peterman. But you kind of get the sense. We kind of wondered early on. The Bears talked about that Trevor Siemian was a better fit for their system over a guy like Nick Foles. But I mean, it could very well be that you're looking at two guys, veteran guys, in Andy Dalton and Nick Foles that have a lot of starting experience, and Trevor Siemian has started some. But you've now got two guys behind Justin Fields that are not on the same level that Andy Dalton and Nick Foles were. And it might be a comfortability type thing with Justin Fields. Empower him to feel like, hey, this is your team. You are the starter. Don't look over your shoulder. You don't have to worry about anyone taking your job. And the other thing, Sean mentioned his footwork. And that is one thing that I will say that's been encouraging to see with Andrew Jonico, working with him at the start of every practice, working on his footwork and specifically working on that footwork while keeping his eyes downfield. It's something that we talked about a lot last year, was a big reason that Justin Fields struggled. If he's able to take that next step in his progressions and be able to get moving on the run and keeping his eyes downfield, he'll be in much better shape this season, Hub.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. And again, I don't mean to suggest that there's no value in all this. Or Justin Fields hasn't done anything wrong, nothing negative, nothing that I'd be concerned about from anything I'm seeing or hearing. I just, maybe it's just because I'm old and cranky, but the cheerleading gets tired after a while.
Well, we go. It's such a long off season. We go through cycles.
Yes.
That's what happens here. Is fans, for a while we want to pick apart Justin Fields and figure out everything that's wrong, and then we start to get some into the practices where at least you have something new to talk about. You can try and dissect every little thing. So then the optimism starts. So it's a long off season. We need things to talk about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was interesting is that we only get 1 of 3 days each of the 3 weeks with the OTAs, and the day that we were there, we saw Justin throw a couple picks and, quite frankly, look pretty awful. The offense wasn't good on Wednesday when we were there. And, the first thing that Flus told us when he came in afterwards and talked to us is, that's going to happen. On Monday, I counted 11 chunk pass plays, and the offense was great. And today the defense had the best of it. So it's the way it should be. It's the way it's going to be. You've got a lot of young kids on both sides of the ball, and they're learning. And I thought Flus Shaw made an interesting point. He said, the problem, guys, is it's my offense and my defense. And so I want one day to have a good day and the other one. I mean, that's the way this is supposed to work. So, but I did think that was kind of funny because, people forget that is, well, what's he supposed to say? Well, he had a bad day because he stinks, or is my defense great? Or maybe, well, of course he's struggling. He's playing my defense, or vice versa. The defense, had a rough day today because Justin is such a great athlete. So I think sometimes we just forget to tell the big picture story.
I'm going to throw this comment up here. Sorry, Sean, from
Mr.
Shorty, and let you guys discuss it since you guys have seen Justin. Justin's release is so much quicker and tighten it up now. We can't help but get excited. Have you guys noticed that at practice? Have you seen his a change in his release, his motion, his throwing motion?
No. I mean, again, Mr. Shorty, how much have you seen? Where is this coming from? They have been working on it. He looks more confident out there. I never had a problem with his throwing motion, to be honest with you. Talked to scouts about that both his redshirt sophomore and junior year before he came out. And yes, it was a bit elongated, but that is a part of what makes him such a good deep ball thrower. So, you want to shorten it a little bit. But then when Mr. Shorty says his release is so much quicker, I mean, says who? You can't tell that in these practices. Again, they're not full speed. It doesn't work that way. And so hopefully it will be, and it should be. That's part of the progression, Sean, with young quarterbacks when they get to a second and third season. But we don't know that yet.
I'm going to disagree with you, Hub. I mean, I thought that was one of the first things I noticed when we got out there this spring is that, obviously it's hard to think back and remember what his throwing motion was like every day last season. The eye test is tough, but I mean, I thought that passed the eye test almost immediately. It looked like he was throwing a little bit quicker. And I know there's a million YouTube, not a million, but there's folks out there with analyzing these videos the Bears put out on social media and all that. But even just watching him throw, I think he does look a little bit quicker. I know it's really hard to say that just watching him throw in person, but I think there is some merit to that. And, we asked Andrew Janocko about it and he didn't get specific, but he made the comment that they're trying to make him more efficient in his game overall. And I think that was his way of saying, indicating that might be one of those things they're looking at.
Yeah, well, Sean, let me rephrase it a little bit then, because we've got some semantics going on here too, though. When you say quicker, Mr. Shorty, I think specifically said that his what he say, his wind up was shorter, and the ball was coming out quicker. When you say the ball coming out quicker, there's no race to get the ball out. They're not running 11 on 11. There's not, it's not that way. We don't know what the route is, so, I mean, yes, they've clearly changed both his footwork and his arm motion, and hopefully that will be productive. I have no reason to doubt it will be. But I just don't know how people can say they've seen these things again in OTAs where you get penalized for accidentally tripping over each other and ending up on the ground.
Yeah. And I'm just saying his throwing motion, his physical throwing motion looks quicker. Obviously when you start getting defensive ends running at you, things change and every play is different. But I think just the mechanics of his throwing motion look quicker.
I think
with quicker, what you're saying though, or I don't want to put words in your mouth. When you say quicker, I think the question was about, he had this elongated, where the ball went down from his knees, came all the way around and over the top. And so shorter, quicker. Yes, they've worked on his arm motion. There's no question about that. And yet, I guess what I'm saying is that how much of a benefit it'll be, is what remains to be seen.
Well, yeah, that's fair to question. I mean, once you get out there playing football, it may not matter when somebody runs the wrong route, then you're going to be in a bad situation anyway.
It's, I think the Bears are on the right track. They seem to be focused on the right areas with Justin Fields, and his confidence definitely seems to be up. You guys are right, though. We'll see. There's reason to be optimistic, but let's wait and see what happens when there's a 300-pound defensive lineman that comes loose against Justin Fields. And see how his progression and release works then, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking about the reason you have these summer workouts. These are the things you do. You do all your self-study, you evaluate all the tape. In this case, you've got a new coaching staff. You focus on the techniques and the fundamentals you want to work on, and that's what they're working on. And they look to be doing a good job working on it. I guess the concern I have with Justin, because there's no disputing his traits, his sky-high ceiling, his athletic ability, his arm talent. It is all there. The biggest issue that I had with him all year last year, though, really had little to do with getting the ball out quickly enough for his release. He didn't know where to throw it. And you mentioned keeping his eyes downfield. Sean, you're right. It's a critical point. But I didn't find that to be – I mean, that was a problem with Mitch. That was when we realized that Mitch Trubisky probably wasn't going to make it here. It's because he was all over the place. With Justin, I actually was kind of impressed with the way he continued to look downfield. He just didn't know what coverage he was throwing into, and that's where he got in trouble. And again, that's not really something that you can work on it, but you can't really see the product of that work in these OTAs or even early in training camp. You got to get some full pad, full contact work and get to an exhibition game and see what it really looks like.
All right, let's pivot off that here. And Robbie had a question about the tight end room. Can we sign a tight end to complement Kmet, O'Shaughnessy, is he good? Hub, I'll let you start, I guess, on this one.
I was going to kick it to Sean on this because I don't have a good answer, but Robbie, they did. They signed both Ryan Griffin and James O'Shaughnessy, and then they brought in Tyson John, who I think, Sean, was he a waiver claim? I don't know if he was.
I want to say yes. He was picked up later than those other guys.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was released and then a waiver claim, and then they've also got the undrafted rookie free agent Chase Allen, who to me so far is the most impressive of the four. So when you say can they, sure they could, but I don't think they have any intentions of doing that. We saw all of their own better players, their veteran free agents. Most of them didn't even get offers. I know that they made no attempt to re-sign James Daniels. They made no attempt to re-sign Akeem Hicks. There could be different reasons for those things. So having already added 4 new tight ends, I doubt that they're out there scouring the streets for another one who's going to kind of be in that same class, Sean, of journeyman backup like a Griffin or an O'Shaughnessy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they necessarily need to even. They got those two guys in O'Shaughnessy, and this is going to be Cole Kmet's show. He's going to be that number one guy, and we saw Chase Allen again, Hub, on Wednesday. We saw him working with that first team offense and getting some reps with those guys, and that's really promising for an undrafted player to come in and do that. I know we're still in June, it's early, things can change, but he may wind up being a part of this whole thing when we get to the season.
Oh, I think that was my kind of first, prediction or guess or comment. We came away from the first OTA and I saw him running with the ones and I said, all right, this kid's going to make the team. When you go back and look at Chase Allen's scouting report, he's a lot like Cole Kmet, but not as good an athlete. He may never be a significant receiver, but a number of scouts I talked to said he was literally the best inline blocking tight end in this draft. And the fact, and a lot of people were surprised that he didn't go at least 5th, 6th round, if not 7th. And so I do like him a lot. I think he is going to make the football team. Griffin and O'Shaughnessy they're better than J.P. Hulse. And no offense to J.P. Hulse, who was also a good blocker and a good special teams player. These guys have been around. They'll catch some passes here and there. So, is it a position of strength, Robbie? No, that's going to have to come from Cole Kmet. But I doubt, Kyle, that's where Ryan Poles and his personnel people are focused right now. There's probably some other areas where they're still watching the streets closely, where they'd like to get more depth and competition.
Yeah, they're not going to add anything at tight end. I would be surprised if they did. O'Shaughnessy and Ryan Griffin are definitely not flashy names, but they are veteran NFL players that have stuck around the league for quite a while now. Guys that should be in the league. Ryan Griffin, in particular, when it comes to the passing game, has had some success more during his days in Houston than in New York. I have a hard time kind of discerning. I know he missed some time in New York. And outside of that, I'm not sure if maybe he started to regress a little bit. He is 32 years old now. The other thing with the Jets offense is it's been completely miserable the last few years, obviously. I think Ryan Griffin can have a nice little role in this offense. I don't expect him to be, a huge contributor, but a guy that's probably going to see 25 to 30 catches, might have a couple touchdowns. I think that's fine when you're looking at a second or third tight end.
He can be the Jesse James of last year.
Yeah, essentially.
Well, and the one other thing to realize, though, guys, is that they don't want these guys on the field. They're rebuilding. They want Cole Kmet out there. If he makes the team, they want Chase Allen out there. If he makes the team, they want Tyson John out there. And these are the kind of guys, look at what they did with the offensive line. They drafted a bunch of day 3 guys, but then you bring in a Julian Davenport, a Sean Coleman, a Dakota Dozier. They know these guys aren't part of the future of this football team, but it gives you some veteran presence to set an example for the kids, and it gives you guys who won't get somebody else hurt if they have to go in as backups. So when you say, will they add another player to the tight end, they don't. I can't imagine they're thinking that, oh boy, there's this one veteran backup tight end out there who we could win one more game with, and they don't really care if they win one more game, to be honest with you. So they'd like to, So it just, I think that, short of a younger, undeveloped talent hitting the street, I mean, the kind of signing I could see now would be like a Will Fuller at minimum salary, something like that, where you've got a guy who you actually think could emerge, could be your next Akeem Hicks. Other than a signing like that, I think they're probably done. I wouldn't expect it. The younger guys will become available, and they'll sign some of those players just like the undrafted free agents out of college. But I don't think you're going to see any more veteran signings unless it's one of these young failed vets that they think they see something in that nobody else saw.
Have you heard anything on Will Fuller in terms of why he hasn't signed anywhere? Because, I know he's had injury history and he's had a PED suspension, but the kid has talent. I guess he's not a kid anymore. He's a veteran wide receiver, but, I'm surprised no one's taken a flyer on him at least.
Well, he had that half a season where he was on a Pro Bowl pace in Houston. Then he got hurt again, and he is one of the fastest guys in the league, and he will catch the ball when you throw it to him, and so it's got to be just about the injury history, and they're not off the field concerns. I mean, the PED stuff, half the time, those are accidents. Half the time.
I believe the PED thing happened when he was trying to come back from an injury too. So I think it might have been.
But I mean, you get a combination of guys in their family life. They get prescribed fertility drugs. Other guys, are prescribed things that have some of these lesser known chemicals in them that weren't even on the label. They don't know. Now, there's also a lot of guys who do it on purpose. I don't want to get caught up in that debate, but in the case of Fuller, he's not a serial abuser, I guess is what I'm saying. And to my knowledge, there's never been any concerns about illegal or inappropriate behavior off the field. So I think it's just a combination of a young man, and when the injuries have just piled up, Sean. I mean, we're talking about different injuries, and every time, you thought maybe, okay, he's finally healthy because he'll have a great game, he'll get hurt again. And even though it's unfair with guys like that, sometimes some of these personnel people will hang a rap on them. Well, will they play through some of the pain that you have to play through in the NFL? I think it's the cumulative effect of all that has Will Fuller still on the street.
Yeah, and you look at Julio Jones is still out there too, and that's another one where he's struggled to stay on the field. So you wonder at what point somebody's going to take a chance on these guys, and you wonder just when that's gonna actually happen, and when they get to that point where somebody feels comfortable giving him a contract.
I think the team, Kyle, that eventually signs Will Fuller is going to be a team that already has an All-Pro or a Pro Bowl veteran receiver in the locker room. Somebody to put an arm around him and say, "Okay, kid, come with me." I'm not sure even how good a fit he'd be in the Bears wide receiver room now, since they don't have anybody like that. By the way,
I kind of agree that.
Receiver.
I kind of agree that would seem like a weird fit, at least just in terms of locker room vibes.
Yeah, that was not a comment on Darnell Mooney at all. I love Darnell Mooney. He's just young, and he's not the guy who can go to Will Fuller, who's older and been around longer than him, and help develop him.
I fully expect Will Fuller to wind up with some team that's competing for a playoff spot, and you say, gosh, how did the Patriots or the Chiefs wind up with him?
It's funny that you immediately go to the Patriots.
Well, yeah, the Patriots, and I wouldn't be shocked to see him in Green Bay. Bring him in and have Randall Cobb throw an arm around him, and see what they can do. He'll play, but I think that a lot of teams are just waiting to see. You've also got the stage now where teams are going to get early into training camp to deal with injuries or unexpected, pup list guys and things like that. So I wouldn't expect, looking at the vets left on the street right now, I don't think you're going to hear a lot of Boltons between now and the start of training camp.
I'm going to throw something out there because it's the middle of June and there's not a lot of football to talk about or hard news to talk about, right, guys? But we see what the chat says here. The rumors persist around Deebo Samuel and DK Metcalf. Hub, do you expect either of those guys to get traded before we get to week 1?
I don't think Deebo Samuel is going to get traded, period. That may make him unhappy, but the 49ers are a team that was a few plays away from a Super Bowl last year. And the most important part of that recipe, Sean, was Deebo Samuel. And so I can't imagine. And they're trying to develop their young quarterback. They're trying to deal Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know what kind of offer it would take to pry Deebo Samuel loose. Now, Metcalf's a little different story. He is a great kid. I know his dad. His dad played for the Bears for a number of years, Terrence Metcalf. He's a great football player. He's a great young man. He just wants to be paid fairly, which is where a lot of these guys get. Now, whether he's going about it right or not, I don't know. But Seattle is probably, when you look at some of these way too early goofy predictions, one of the teams that I regularly see below the Bears, and there's not a lot of them, is Seattle, because they don't have the quarterback thing figured out, not to mention, that their older veterans are all gone now too. So I think there is a chance that DK Metcalf gets dealt. I think it's going to take at least 2 first-round picks and a little bit more. But Seattle would be silly not to do that at this point, because like the Bears, even though they may not want to admit it, they're kind of in a rebuilding place. Sean, I saw your eyebrows go up.
You think it would take 2 first-round picks for Metcalf?
Well, I think it's a seller's market right now, and if you got it for AJ Brown, I think that Metcalf's ceiling is probably just a hair higher than AJ Brown's, more than a hair higher actually, if you look at what they've done early in the league. So yeah, I think that's probably what it's going to take. So
potentially 2 first-round picks, and you have to pay him Cooper Kupp money.
Yeah, you got to pay him big money too.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Hub that I can see Metcalf being traded. Sometime in the near future. I don't know if I see Deebo Samuel getting out of San Francisco at this point. I mean, he's so valuable to their offense, and I just think that while that relationship is maybe strained a little bit, I don't think it's at a point where they're gonna deal him, at least not this season.
Kyle, there's something. I know we want to get to the Bears' offensive line, but there's something else going on there. With the Deebo thing, because when he asked for the trade, it's hard to imagine that was strictly about money, because he's not even due for an extension yet. I mean, he's due for an extension. They can do it, but I mean, they can tie him up for 3-4 more years, and so something else had to happen there. That he said, "I want out of San Francisco," and I think that's kind of the missing piece in all this. And then you ask yourself the question, well, whatever it was obviously fairly serious, but is it something that can be fixed? So I just think we don't have enough information yet to know, what's really the problem or the rub in Frisco.
And this is pure speculation on my part here. I do wonder with the way that they utilized him out of the backfield to the extent that they did, if that caused him to say, listen, if I'm going to take a beating like this, then I want to be paid earlier, before I have to worry about a serious injury.
You could very well be right, but I think he also has to know that that's what's made him so valuable.
Yeah,
strictly as a receiver, it's a little different with him. Metcalf, I think, could command 2 first-round picks as a receiver. I'm not sure Deebo would get more than a 1 and a 2, 1 and a 4, something like that. But when you throw in the jack of all trades stuff, he becomes a solid MVP candidate every year.
Before we pivot over to the offensive line, Mr. Shorty, as I said, it's June. Let's get weird here. He asked the question: trade Roquan for DK. Just thinking out loud. Would that make any sense, guys?
I think it would make tremendous sense for one reason, because I know from talking to him that DK and his dad, one of their dreams was he was a Bear, and the Bears aren't giving up 2 first-round picks for him. That said, I wouldn't be any more anxious to trade Roquan Smith than I would DK Metcalf. So it's an interesting, it's a win-win. There's no question. I mean, Roquan would be going and stepping right into the legacy of Bobby Wagner, and that's one of the big holes that the Seahawks have to fill. They do have Tyler Lockett there and some other guys who can catch the football, but it's just, as much as it would make sense for both teams to acquire those players, Sean, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for either team to let one of those players get away.
Yeah, I'm sure Sean Desai would make a strong push for that in Seattle. In this fantasy world where we're talking about this deal, if you go to Roquan Smith and you say, come on, man, are you really going to re-sign here? Or are we going to get an extension done or not? And he says, no, maybe not. In that case, if you think there's no chance that you're going to sign him long-term, then why not make a deal like that? You can get a player who wants to be here and who could be a big part of your offense for the next few years. I don't necessarily see a deal like that actually happening, but in a perfect world, that could make some sense.
Kyle, I know we should get to the offensive line, but just one more thing real quick on Roquan that's been kind of rolling around the back of my mind the last few weeks is that I can't remember the last young man in this league that I was more impressed by than Roquan Smith. I mean, as a football player, his work ethic, his ability, his character, the way he carries himself, everything about him. And he's clearly kind of a renaissance man of sorts as we get to know a little bit more about him. But the fact that he still doesn't have an agent. He's still obviously not focused and worried about this. And now you're getting into that pivotal time, because if this doesn't get done by the middle of August, I don't think it gets done, to be honest with you, until you get to next year, the beginning of the free agency cycle. And there's something, if you recall, I think it was year 2, he was gone for 2 weeks with a personal issue that we never found out what it was. And that is highly unusual. I mean, eventually it always comes out. Somebody can figure it out. It just kind of went away. And it's always been in the back of my mind, what was that about? It might have just been a growing up thing. It could have been a family thing. It could have been a million things. But it was quiet and it was mysterious and we never knew. And after that, he stayed very quiet for a while. And then it took a year or two for him to start to come out of his shell. But I do think it's possible there's at least a little piece of Roquan that we still don't know. I'm not suggesting it's anything that would cause the Bears to be stupid enough to let him just leave via free agency. But it's kind of a missing piece here that I struggle with when I try and figure out what to guess and what to predict with Roquan. And
that was a really weird day. We had no idea coming into Sunday at Soldier Field. I forget who they were playing against that day. And when the inactives came out, they said 58, and everybody was like, "What? 58?" Mm-hmm. And if I recall, I think didn't he show up on the sideline at some point during that game? I think he did. Yeah. Yeah, that was a strange situation. It made it that much more puzzling, and there was somebody else on the team going through some what should I call them, counseling type situations, some stuff that they had going on. That, as I recall, led to the confusion a little bit more. Not that Roquan had the same thing or anything like that, but it was just a real mysterious time, and we never did get an answer to that. So it could or may not be a factor. I don't know.
Yeah, I completely had forgotten about that. But yeah, that was kind of weird how that just popped up on a game day. But all right, you guys want to talk some offensive line here?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was Sean who reported it. So, Sean, I'll let you set it up, and we can go from there.
Yeah, we came in on Wednesday, and I'm sure, you guys listening, you're big Bears fans, you know what's going on. But we came in, and Braxton Jones is playing left tackle, and Larry Borum is over on the right side with the ones, and then Tevin Jenkins is playing right tackle with the second team. And Matt Eberflus told us afterwards that this was just planned maintenance, not maintenance, but mix and match, I guess. They want to figure out which combinations of these guys are going to work. And if there's a time to test Braxton Jones and see what he can do with the ones, OTAs is the time to do it. But I don't know if you want to read into that, you can, I guess. Hub, what did you make of Tevin Jenkins moving down to the second team and Braxton Jones getting a shot?
Well, I think that it's a mistake to read too much into it because Flus has told us from the beginning it's the kind of thing he's going to do. We saw it with Jaylon Johnson. We're only seeing one of 3 practices, so we don't know if it's more than once. We don't know if it's done with other guys either. It's just what happens on the day that we're out there. Although something I hadn't even thought of until just now, it is interesting that clearly Matt Eberflus and everybody in that organization knows the day that we're going to be out there and it's going to get reported. And if they wanted to avoid this kind of conversation, they would just not do it on the days that we're there. So that suggests that it's not something that they're really calculating or planning, and it is just what he says. But here's what really bothers me about it is you're not seeing anybody taking reps from Cody Whitehair at left guard, which makes sense because Cody Whitehair is the best offensive lineman on the team right now. But you're not seeing anybody take reps at center, including Sam Mustipher, who had the job and did nothing to lose the job. It was given to Lucas Patrick, who quite frankly in his 5-year NFL career has done nothing to earn the job. But you don't see Lucas Patrick getting, sat down. And so you figure, all right, well, these guys are set. They're not going to do anything about that. At right guard, where they don't really have a starter quality player, you don't see anybody but Dakota Dozier and Sam Mustipher taking reps there. So if you wanted to get Braxton Jones in at left tackle and Tevin Jenkins was set at right tackle, then you just drop, Larry Borum to the second unit for the day, which is what's happened with these other changes. The next guy up has gone in and the other guy's got dropped. Or move Larry Borum over to right guard, which may be his best position, and you don't have a starter there. So I don't think you can say that it's only significant that Braxton Jones was elevated to start at left tackle in practice. I want to see what he can do too. But why was Tevin Jenkins the guy who took the bullet? That suggests to me that they're not sold on Tevin Jenkins. Either that, or that I think it was the same thing with Jalen Johnson. I think it was more about motivation than anything else. They saw this as possibly a way to motivate him a little bit. But Kyle, it just feels to me like, Tevin Jenkins his arrow may not be going up as fast as they would like.
Really, since training camp started last year, and we found out about Tevin Jenkins undergoing the back surgery, I guess we found out about that near the end of training camp, right? It was at first it was just he was going to be held out. And then as we got close to the regular season, I believe is when they announced that he was going to undergo a procedure for his back. But things have kind of felt off with him ever since last August. And, it's hard to put a finger on it, but when you spent time around NFL teams and the way they operate, you can kind of get a feel when something isn't right. And I'm getting that feeling with Tevin Jenkins.
Yeah. That's exactly kind of where my column that just went up last night or this morning is coming from. I mean, we just talked to him last week, and the quote that stuck with me when asked about how he feels about the new coaching staff and all the changes in the organization is he said, "Hey, I've got to earn their trust. I've got to show them, that I, should be the starting tackle for the Chicago Bears." And he said, "Once I have earned that trust, it'll give me confidence and comfort." Well, apparently he hasn't earned that trust, and it just seems strange to me that the week after that they do this. And so if they are trying to motivate him, I'm not sure this is the way I would go about it. And Sean, to go a step further, I've always been interested since he got here. How guys sometimes seem more mature than you expect, or just seem, we use the expression full grown man around these kids a lot. And other times you get guys that just seem a little shy and a little timid. Jenkins, and this is unfair, I know, but I'm being honest, and it's just I'm not right. I'm just telling you what I see is he almost strikes me as a little immature sometimes, and I don't know if that's fair or not because quite frankly I don't get to see him or talk to him all that much. But I think Kyle put it best. Something just feels a little off right there. It just doesn't feel like this is a second year future Pro Bowl offensive tackle ready to go out and beat people up.
Yeah, and look, I think when this is all said and done, and provided that everybody's healthy, I think we're going to wind up with Larry Borum and Tevin Jenkins in those tackle spots in week one. I don't necessarily expect a rookie from Southern Utah to come in and start right away in Braxton Jones. That being said, the other thing, the one thing I would read into this is that clearly Larry Borum has put himself in a good position. They seem to like him on either side, and they seem to. I would imagine this means they think he's their best tackle. Whether you put him on the right side, whether you put him on the left side, Larry Borum seems to be in a good position to be a starter here.
Sean, I couldn't agree with you more. And yet, if that is the case, if they know that Larry Borum is their best tackle, give him a breather today. Put him with the second team. Put Jones with the first team. Why sit down Jenkins?
Say okay, exactly, you're good. Just take it. Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly the point, Kyle.
Yeah. You look at Tevin Jenkins too, and he was a second round pick last year, a guy that some teams had a first round grade on. I think
the Bears.
I think we would have. A lot of people would have been okay if the Bears had taken him in the first round. This was a guy that headed before the back issues cropped up. A lot of us assumed that we'd see him as a starter, if not week one, really early in that season. So to go from that expectation to the potential where he hasn't really going into year 2 solidified a starting job, to where he's getting dropped in the second team, and we're even having this conversation, should be a bit of a concern.
Yeah, although I do think, in all fairness, we got to separate the two, because he obviously had a legitimate back injury. He had surgery on it, and that's what cost him his rookie year. So, that piece of it, I don't want to downgrade him for that. But I saw you had a comment up quickly from our buddy Rick Gonzalez, who said he's not their draft choice, so they've got nothing invested in him. Rick, that's a cliche that isn't true. Yeah, you're right. He's not their draft choice. So as far as Ryan Poles looking bad, if he doesn't work out, yeah, he can say it's not my fault. But every team in the NFL that I know of had at least a second round, if not a first round grade on him. Remember, the Bears traded up to 39 to get him. He wasn't getting out of the second round. So I think the point here isn't who drafted him. It's that he is the best prospect on the offensive line that they have, the area that they are desperately trying to, improve. And so if what they're seeing now that they have him is that maybe he's either not close yet, or maybe he's not going to be the guy, that's fine if they don't have to take the fall for it. But they do have to take the fall for not doing more in free agency to bring in better tackles if, in fact, they looked at his tape and decided they didn't like the kid. So nobody gets a pass on this if Tevin Jenkins doesn't work out.
Yeah, and they're going to have to – I mean, he's got 3 more years on his rookie contract, whether he's their guy or not. They're going to have to figure out what to do with him and those remaining 3 years. And you hope that he can turn into a starter and a guy that is going to, hold down that right tackle spot.
And Kyle, again, we have to be careful with this stuff during the offseason. I'm not suggesting, I don't think anybody's suggesting at this point that Tevin Jenkins is a bust, because I will tell you that one team that I know had a first round grade on him as a guard. And so there was even talk when they drafted him that maybe he ends up playing guard as opposed to tackle in the NFL. So there's a long road to go here, and he's a really good kid, and so there's a chance he's still going to turn out to be a really good football player. But this is the things that we watch and learn for during these OTAs and during the off season and when we get to training camp. And Kyle, it just feels to me like this coaching staff is a little concerned right now about where he's at if he had to line up and play, right tackle for him right now.
And look, it wasn't like Braxton Jones came out and was the best tackle of all time on Wednesday. He had a false start that hurt them in the 2-minute drill, and Justin Fields threw a pick the next play. So we're not ready to anoint him as a starting tackle at this point.
No, I think concern from the coaching staff is the right phrasing for it here. I mean, if they were overly concerned, if they were concerned he was going to be a full-on bust or something like that, then yeah, I would expect Ryan Poles would have spent more than a day 3 draft pick, or would have brought in a veteran in free agency. They obviously felt comfortable enough to move forward without really bolstering the tackle position in either of those. The coaching staff, I would say, would.
Are we losing Kyle, or am I going out?
I was going to say, I'm not sure if it's me or Kyle, but for those of you listening, Kyle's got a little internet connection thing going on there. I think we got you back now, Kyle.
I dropped for a second. No, all I was saying, like, there's definitely a level of concern within the coaching staff over Tevin Jenkins. It's just it's hard to read how much right now. CJ Williams did say one quickly. Coach has literally said, don't read too much into that. CJ, I will never believe a coach when he says, don't read too much into that, because they're going to. It doesn't matter what NFL coach you're talking to. It doesn't matter if it's a high school coach. Actually, coaches lie. So,
well, not only that, Kyle, but CJ, I think I've said 3 or 4 times now, we're not going to read too much into it. We'll see what happens. But you can't pretend there isn't a reason for it.
They're doing it for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is a reason that he was running with the second team, and Flus knows that as well as the rest of us. And so I'm not reading anything into it, but we have to speculate as to what it might be, because that's how you see how these guys are developing. So, Kyle, unfortunately, we're on a bit of a hard stop today because of some stuff we've got scheduled afterwards, but we've got a few minutes left here. Are there any other comments or any folks that you that you want to get in that maybe we should try and answer?
Yeah, let's try one more before we get out of here. Hopefully my internet decides to cooperate as it's now dropped twice here. So sorry about that. CJ had asked a question about three technique earlier. I think we'll in there. Is three technique still a weakness? I don't believe that it is, but is that feasible spot for additions, Hub?
Well, CJ, interestingly, Sean and I did get to talk to Justin Jones this week. He was, I thought, more settled and confident and impressive. Not that he wasn't impressive the first couple times we talked to him. He was just more this time. And he believes that, I think he said that he's never been more comfortable, that he thinks he's a perfect fit for the position. I don't know that we have enough Chargers tape on him. First of all, he was never a pure or true three technique with the Chargers. He played that spot, but it's different in different defenses. And remember, Brandon Staley, the former Bears coach under Vic Fangio, was there, and he's a 3-4 guy. And so I think that Justin Jones has a chance to be a very good football player. But Sean, I don't know if we know enough about him to know if he can, play that disruptive three technique role. I do know that Mario Edwards Jr. has been a man without a position for 3 or 4 years, and I think three technique may be where he fits best, based on his particular skill set. And so I think between he and Jones pushing each other, whether they're going to find that three technique of the future for when this team is ready to contend or not, I don't know. But I think they'll probably get enough out of the position that it shouldn't hamper the rest of the defense and what they're trying to do and improve at.
Yeah, I think Justin Jones is going to be, the guy for this season at least. They're going to at least see what they have in him, and if he can play that spot, and then maybe reassess this again next offseason. That's interesting about Mario, Hub. You bring up a good point, and we really haven't gotten to see him this spring. I don't know if he's like Robert Quinn. He hasn't really been around very much, so we don't really have much of a read on what their plan is with Mario. But yeah, maybe he could be in that spot along with Justin Jones, and maybe they see what they got in those two guys and reassess next year.
Yeah, I've got to double check myself, Kyle, but I believe when we talked to Travis Smith a couple of weeks ago, the new defensive line coach, he did at least mention that Mario would compete at that position. And it makes sense because he was always undersized to be playing in a 30 front. He really didn't play in the 30 front for the Bears. He played in the sub packages in the 40 front, and then he was used as an interior pass rusher. He's built, I guess, mostly like a 40 front defensive end. And he doesn't look as big as they list him, but they list him at about 290, about 6'3", 290. And that's actually a little bigger than Aaron Donald, not heavier, but a little taller and rangier, and very similar in weight. So, when you look again at his skill set, because he's a great penetrator, he's got that great first step, and he's used it primarily as a pass rusher, but that is what you'd like to see out of the three technique. And Justin Jones may have it too. I really don't know. I'll tell you what, of the veteran free agents they brought in, he got the biggest deal. He got 2 years for $12 million, $11 million. I was really a little surprised at that. Now, part of that was a little bit of panic because remember, they thought it was going to be Larry Ogunjobi, and then while they were messing around with that, a couple other guys got away, and so that's still a contract they can easily walk away from after this year. But I think they're serious about hopefully him being able to be a long range answer as opposed to just short term.
Yeah, Justin Jones is definitely going to get the first crack at it. Going back to my idea of throwing things against the wall here in June, Larry Ogunjobi is still out there on the street, guys. Do you think, and it might not even be with the Bears considering the way things fell apart, he may not have any interest in coming back to Chicago, but see a guy that's going to probably get a look from teams during training camp, bring him in and see if he's healthy?
Well, the only thing I can assume, Sean, is that he's not. The Bears saw something in that physical, and that this is more of the doctors than the team. Because if there was a team whose medical evaluation disagreed with the Bears, I would think he'd already be signed. So now it's horrible when this stuff happens. If it turns out that he is healthy, then I feel bad for him, and shame on the Bears. But I think the fact that he's still on the street is kind of supporting, the Bears' decision to move on. Yeah,
once he gets healthy and if he can pass a physical, I fully expect somebody to give him a shot. The big question is when that's going to be. We don't really know what the real situation is with his foot, and Maybe he's like we were talking with the wide receivers. Maybe he does get a shot here midway through training camp once some injuries crop up.
I've been searching Google News as we were talking about this, just trying to see if there's been any update. I can't find anything on Larry Ogunjobi, like outside of like the fan blogs and stuff. Like, there has been no update about his medical situation. So
Yeah, I believe, and teams can't really say anything because of HIPAA laws that protect all of us, not just, football players. But I believe there was confirmation that the problem was with the surgical foot.
Yeah,
but other
there
than that,
was.
but we still
I think
don't
Cole's
know.
told us that. Yeah.
Yeah, but we still don't know what those complications are, and so whether the concern is that it's just not healed properly, or that it's healed but there's something in the structure of his foot that suggests that it will get injured again. We just don't know, but I suspect it's the latter, which is what would cause teams from making any long-term commitment to him. It could also be that he's already had a few offers on 1-year prove-it deals that are so far from the $40 million and $23 million guaranteed the Bears gave him that he's sitting tight for a little while. There's no upside to him at this point to take a bad deal, just to get in camp with somebody.
Yeah, that's very true. That's a good point, Hub. All right, you guys want to get out of here?
Well, I think we have to. We actually could do this all day long because it's always fun, but we will have plenty of news for everybody next week, as Sean and I will be with the team Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And so I expect, Kyle, we can just stick with our 9:30 Chicago time unless something comes up. Watch the Twitter accounts and we'll let you know. If you want to join us live and you're with us live right now, you know how to do it. Go to one of our Twitter handles at Sean_Hammond, at Kyle Nabors, at Hub_Arkush. You can just go to YouTube and find us that way. Or if you prefer getting this as just a podcast and listening, then make sure you've got your subscription all set. You do that by going to iTunes or the App Store on your phone or shawlocal.com. So thank you all for being with us so much this week. We hope you all have a great week. And we will, by the way, you want to be at shawlocal.com 24/7 next week, as we're reporting from minicamp every day, all day long. But then we'll wrap it up for you on the podcast right here again next week. So until then, have a great week, everybody.